Farm Credit East for their assistance in helping these webinars happen. My name is Emmeline Long, and I'm the New York Corn and Soybean Growers Representative to the Farm Viability Board. The Corn and Soybean Growers Association has had a long relationship with farm viability since its founding, and I'm pleased to be with you here today. In 2017, I completed a master's degree in animal science at Cornell University with a focus on forage yield monitoring and yield variability on dairy farms. My undergraduate degree, also from Cornell, was in agricultural sciences. Until just recently, I've been working as a crop production manager at CY Farms in Genesee County. Through that role, I'm fortunate to have been able to participate in discussions about soil health and new technologies from both the perspective of a farmer and academic researcher. At Cornell and during my internships, I saw firsthand how quickly new technologies were being developed and the potential these tools could have for farming. From predictive models based on large-scale data analysis to drone imagery and soil sensors, the list of possibilities to be explored is almost endless. The discussion on how these tools can help advantage agriculture has only intensified as the urgency to develop solutions to help mitigate our changing climate has grown. We all agree that there is a clear need to strengthen our farms to be able to mitigate the impact of a changing climate on our crops. What we don't know yet is which of these tools will really work, or if farms have the resources, skills, and desire to implement these specific solutions. That's why these Friday discussions are so important and timely. Our Farm Viability Program, which has been focusing on encouraging change for 16 years now, has been able to see common elements among the ideas that have and haven't worked. Our first session featured behavioral science experts, and our second session looked at the transformation of New York's apple orchards. Insights from both of these prior sessions stress the value of farmer engagement throughout the process of developing new approaches. I'm happy to report the growers on the Field Crops Review panel are engaged and committed to evaluating and ranking our proposals. Here's a video from one of our panel members about why he participated.
Amos Smith, dairy and field crop farmer in Livingston County. Having served on the Field Crops Review panel now for several years, I believe it's very important to support an organization like Farm Viability. The project leaders have to think like us farmers. A lot of times the projects that are seen in the RFP have economic impacts to us as farmers at the real life level. And that's what we need. We need to see real projects that have lasting impacts on our business, that will push us forward, that will make us better. And that's why we do what we do as farmers, because we're here to create a succession plan for our family, to provide for our family, to provide for our communities, to better the environment around us. I think it's very important to support an organization like Farm Viability because of that, because of the projects that they encompass, they bring to the table to us farmers and give us real information that
As Amos mentioned, it's really important to have growers involved in the farm viability projects. And all of the panelists here today incorporate that, and they will speak more to that later. As I think about it, there are 3 easily agreed upon goals for soil health management. The first one is to keep soil covered and avoid bare soil throughout the year. The second is to minimize tillage or avoid tillage altogether. And the third is to practice the 4 R's when it comes to nutrient management. The benefits of these 3 practices are significant. Soil that is covered reduces erosion. No-till practices promote carbon sequestration, and the 4 R's support soil health and good stewardship. So why isn't this happening on the ground? Exactly how to achieve these goals while maintaining yield and thin profit margins is still a work in progress, which is why it is so important to keep research in these areas moving forward. This work is made even more complex when you realize that to accomplish goal number 1, keeping the soil covered, by planting cover crops, you are likely to encounter challenges with achieving goal number 2, avoiding tillage, as the use of cover crops usually requires that the crop be terminated, either by an herbicide or through tillage. One possible solution may be a practice called planting green. That is, planting the main crop, like corn or soybeans, through a cover crop before the cover crop has fully died. If this can work on New York farms, it will significantly help reduce the need for tillage. Farm Viability and the New York corn and soybean growers are supporting research into that topic with an American Farmland Trust project led by Aaron Risto, who is with us today. Another solution that Farm Viability has supported to help keep soil covered throughout the year is work with an independent agronomist, Tom Kilser, who is located in Eastern New York. Tom believes that by moving the conversation from cover crops, which cost a farmer money, to winter forages, which create value for a farm, particularly dairy farms, there would be interest in their use. Over the years, Farm Viability review panels consistently prioritized his proposals, and as a result, the organization supported a series of projects to identify the best winter forage crops for New York growing conditions. This work also sought to understand what combination of summer and winter crops can create the most nutritious feed for dairies and help grow them. As a result, 60,000 acres of winter forages are now on the ground in the winter after corn silage is harvested. Of course, the challenges associated with using reduced till and cover crop practices are not limited to field crops or even large-scale agriculture. In both 2006 and 2012, Farm Viability funded work with Anu Ranjaran and the Cornell Small Farms Program to conduct on-farm trials to help vegetable growers adopt reduced till practices. We've also funded several projects that evaluated the use of cover crops under vine fescues in New York's vineyards. That work has been conducted on Long Island as well as in juice grape vineyards in Western New York. The perennial nature of apples and grapes and the structure of an orchard or vineyard's growing system provides a natural advantage from a soil health perspective. Lastly, nutrient management is a critical piece of the sustainable practices puzzle. Poor management of inputs can lead to runoff, which can create negative environmental impacts, particularly in our waterways. And runoff of nutrients mean that a farm can be literally washing away their money. The ag community has been emphasizing the 4 R's of nutrient management in recent years. It means using the right source of a nutrient at the right rate, at the right place, at the right time in the growing season. In fact, the New York State Agribusiness Association, NYSABA, has implemented a 4R nutrient stewardship certification program, which encourages agricultural retailers to adopt proven best practices through the 4 R's. Again, it sounds simple, but taking the first steps in that direction are not too hard. But with New York's variable soils, the right rate won't be universal across the field. Farm Viability has funded several projects seeking solutions that will work for New York farmers to address in-field variability. We supported the development of AdaptEnd by Harold Van Ness at Cornell. This tool uses a predictive model to help farms manage their nitrogen use on corn within a field. We've also supported work by Corinne Ketterings, also from Cornell and here today, to develop a New York-specific nitrogen model for a tool called GreenSeeker that was already on the market. Both tools are currently used by agricultural consultants at farms in New York, but neither has seen widespread adoption yet in our state. We've seen that these precision agriculture tools can be expensive to use and require investments in equipment, both yield monitors and variable rate applicators, and many farms do not have both of these pieces of technology in place. Farms can often be hesitant to invest in yield monitors and variable rate applicators because they aren't sure that they will create value. But without them, any type of precision nutrient management is almost impossible. That's why the New York Farm Viability Program that supports applied research, work that happens on New York farms, combined with economic analysis and extensive outreach and education is so important. I believe that New York has some of the best farms in the country, with farmers who are truly open to change and adapting their practices. I'm eager to hear from our panelists about the work they are doing, what they think is next, and why they believe it will work on New York farms. Now I will hand the screen over to New York Farm Viability's Executive Director, Dave Grusenmeyer, who will be moderating our panel. While we'll be taking questions at the end, please feel free to send them in through the chat at any point.
Thanks, Emma. So we have a great panel with us today, and I'm excited to hear from them. They're some very experienced panelists that have experience not only in their subject areas, but also as farm viability project leaders. So let's go through the panel. We'll start with Corinne, and then Aaron, and then Justine, and have you introduce yourselves quickly, and then we'll get started into some question and answer here on the panel.
All right, thank you, and thanks for inviting me to be part of the panel. My name is Corinne Ketterings. I joined Cornell University a little over 20 years ago with responsibilities statewide for nutrient management for field crops. And for all practical purposes, that means I work with farmers, dairy farms, and cash grain operations to help make the decisions about nutrient management on farms for crop production and for protection of the environment. I lead the nutrient management SPEAR program at Cornell, and I'll share a little bit more about that once we get to the questions.
Thank you. Aaron?
Hello, my name is Aaron Risto, and I'm the Agricultural Stewardship Program Manager for American Farmland Trust. I've been at AFT for a few years. Prior to that, I have experience at soil and water conservation districts, and also I did spend a little time with Harold Van Ness and at Cornell with the soil health program, and Bob Schindlebeck and others there. And so most of my experience up until today too is working mostly with farms to help them implement practices that mitigate the environmental effects, but also trying to help them stay economically viable. And so I'll talk a little bit about that more too myself later.
Great, thanks. Justine?
Hello, everyone. My name is Justine Vanden Heuvel. I'm a professor in the School of Integrated Plant Science at Cornell University. And as a viticulturist, I work closely with grape growers around the Finger Lakes and around New York State to improve production practices with the aim of improving economic and environmental sustainability. I'm also actively involved in the viticulture and enology teaching program at Cornell as well.
Great, thank you. So let's get right into some questions here. So Corinne, well, it wasn't a farm viability project. What can you tell us about your phosphorus work, and share with us your perspective about why farmers have been able to better manage phosphorus in its use?
Yeah, certainly. As I mentioned, I've been at Cornell for 20 years now. The project about phosphorus fertilizer use was actually one of the first ones we did. This included a large number of on-farm trials based on a question that farmers and crop consultants came to us with. And the simple question was, do we need to use phosphorus fertilizer under particular soil test conditions? So the setting at that time was the CAFO regulations were coming in. First CAFO permit was released. There was a growing awareness of potential impact that excess phosphorus could have on water quality. So one of the first questions I got once I came to Cornell was basically, can we evaluate that question? Can we look at under what conditions we need phosphorus fertilizer and when we don't? So Carl Zimmick with the Prodary program was at Cornell already when I joined, and together we set up this project, involved a large number of crop consultants, extension educators, and conducted on-farm research. And this particular project was the beginning of our on-farm research network. Farmers working with farm advisors, certified crop advisors, private sector, and looking together at a relevant question. Do we need phosphorus fertilizer? at that time, and basically learning how to work together to get answers to these questions. So what we did there was on-farm trials. We put in various rates, including a no phosphorus comparison. We had lots of dots on the map. As you can see, each single dot is an experiment. We did field visits. We walked through and tried to identify where the phosphorus was left out. And we trained a lot of folks in doing on-farm research, because the power was in doing the same type of comparisons all over the state of New York, so that we could pull the data together and draw conclusions. And what this basically showed was, for the farmers and the consultants, was that we didn't need extra phosphorus as long as the soil test was classified as optimum or higher. Because we worked together on this, because it was so visible for the farmers that participated and the consultants, the message spread from there. So the consultants started talking with other clients that didn't have these on-farm trials housed at their location about the results, and it spread rapidly. And as a result, fertilizer phosphorus use in the state of New York was drastically reduced over time. So it was, in my experience, why did the changes happen? It was a combination of farmers and crop consultants coming with the question, on-farm trials, on-farm research network. It was a relevant question. It had economic relevance to the farmers. They could save some money. And it identified, in terms of the results, where phosphorus was needed versus where it was not needed. So farmers had gained the trust in making better decisions about fertilizer allocation. We've worked with this model ever since, given its power in terms of having people make decisions, more informed decisions.
Great, thank you. I'm going to turn now to Aaron. So you've clearly put some significant thought into the barriers for practice adoption. Can you tell us about the work you're doing and how you hope it will overcome some of those barriers?
Sure. Again, thank you for this opportunity to share, and I really enjoy working with farm viability on various projects over the years. And so we did have a lot of, we've worked with a lot of advisory groups. In particular, I'm focused on the Genesee River watershed in Western New York. And so we did get a lot of input directly from farmers, and also from agencies, people that work with farmers directly. And we did get barriers identified, and a lot of it just has to do with the lack of information about a lot of different things. One of them that was brought up earlier is economics. You know, what are these practices that that farmers are being asked to do? What are they going to cost? And there is a belief out there that that the upfront costs exceed the benefits in the short term anyway. And so, you know, so I have been working to address that with some economic case studies, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But there's also some agronomic questions out there too, that farmers in our area in particular, there's not a lot of research that's done in Western New York for the type of farms that are there. And so we also are working to gather data to better inform farmers so that they can be more confident about the decisions that they're making, and that also advisors are giving them. And so actually kind of giving, I want to thank Quirine. She has been working with farms in a network for a long time, and I think it's a great idea. And we've have also done that. So I had some influence there from Quirine with the idea of developing a farmer network. And so we do have the Genesee River Demonstration Farm Network. We initially got some funding from New York NRCS, but we also have support from Farm Viability. And so we have now 9 farms that we are working with. And that's really our approach to overcoming these barriers, is to focus on farms that are doing a good job of managing for soil health in particular. They have a lot of records, and so we can collect data from them that we're confident about. And so the first major thing that we've done is to develop economic case studies. And so currently we have 3, but we're going to be doing them for the rest of the farms. So we'll have 9 total in the next few years. They are consuming to make. And so, but the intention is for them to be easily digested and read. So they're only a couple of pages, 2 pages front and back. And the front is about their story. So you kind of get an idea of why they're doing these things. And then the back is sort of the analysis. We're also doing an environmental analysis as well, just so that they can also see that what they're doing has sort of a win-win situation for their farm and also for the environment. The cornerstone of the demonstration farm network is we do have demonstration plots. So we are collecting data on real farms. And we are looking into currently, going back to the principles that Emma was talking about keeping the soil covered, minimizing your tillage, and also how nutrient management is affected. So we're addressing some of those by focusing currently on the 9 farms. We're going to be looking at some different aspects of planting green, which is a no-till and cover crop practice. And because there isn't a lot of folks doing it, but there are tremendous potential benefits if we can figure out how to make it work on farms. And so one of the things that we're looking at is actually just proper seeding rates. A lot of the recommendations that are given in the standards actually produce too much biomass, and so it's hard to plant into that in the spring. So we're looking at the right rates. Another thing we're looking at is, planting green is a higher level of management. So how beneficial is it in terms of soil health and building that, regenerating the soil? So we're looking at just terminating the cover crop versus allowing it to grow 2, 3, 4 more weeks and then planting into it. And so it's just getting started. So we don't have data yet. I mean, we've collected some baseline stuff, but we don't have an analysis yet. But so that's another challenge, is some of these results may take longer than the 3 or 4 years that we have, but we're getting started on that. So that those plots are going to give us some data, and they're also just there to be looked at. So we're going to have a lot of outreach based on those plots. And so hopefully someday we can get out there in person and look at them, but we have made a few videos based on some plots. And we are definitely going to be making some more as if they were a field day, but hopefully soon we can just have a real field day. So we're going to have some field days. Another cornerstone, another piece of this is that we have 9 farms that they can learn from each other. And so we're going to use those farms for smaller farmer to farm networking. So the goal is to have, we're working with Jody Putman at Cooperative Extension to help organize some smaller groups, some like peer-to-peer learning from farmers directly. So going to some of those farms during different times of the year and talking about what they're doing. And so we're hoping to do that. So I just wanted to just quickly share that, because I'm not sure how much time I've spent, but so some of the results so far for the economics anyway. We have the 3 farms that we've done. 2 of them are crop farms, and the other one is a organic dairy. So we're seeing that there are costs for sure, but the benefits are being, and mostly those are coming from equipment, time spent learning, and also just the cost of cover crop seed. But they're all seeing overall a net income. So one of the farms has a $55 per acre, the crop farm, Gary Swede Farm, working with Jay Swede, an annual net income. And that's largely from going from 3 or 4 passes to just 1 pass at planting. John McCauley has a $44 per acre overall net income. And again, mostly from that reducing his tillage. And then the dairy farm was already doing a lot of practices, so his impact was a little bit more minimal, but he has an $11 per acre net income. Despite having limited tools, he does still have to do a lot of tillage because he's organic. So I think I will stop there. we're just going to keep, the next step really is to develop some more support behind these farms. So coming up with some programs maybe where we make some equipment available and provide more financial and technical assistance as we get more information.
Okay. Great, thanks, Aaron. So we did get a question just came in, since we have just a little bit of time here. We're doing really well on time. I'm proud of the panel here for that. But one of the questions just came in: how are you measuring the beneficial effects on the soil?
Well, we're using indicators to look at. So I don't have the slide up, and I don't have them all memorized. So I can't tell you all of the 11 of them. But we are using some soil indicators. So we are looking at like organic matter. We are taking soil moisture. We are looking at biomass of the cover crop. We are looking at insects. And so we have about 11 of them. But a few of them are the economic indicators as well. And so, we have an economic and environmental analysis using models. So I don't know, is that, again, I'm not sure.
That's great, thanks. So now what I want to do is just offer for the three of you, if any of the three of you have some comment that you would like to add to what the other person said, and then we'll move from there to Justine. So anybody have anything to add or comments to highlight or agree with? Or looks like not so much. Okay, that's good. So we're really right on time. So Justine, you've recently been evaluating new technology, the use of soil microbial stimulants for grape growers. Can you tell us more about the farmer interest in that topic, what the benefits of those products might be, and what's your experience along those lines?
Sure. So a few years ago, a group of growers approached me, led by Scott Osborne of Fox Run Vineyards, and said, we've been using these soil biostimulants. So these are different products that have various fungi and bacteria in them that are supposed to make a difference for vine health and soil health. Of course, we have so little understanding of soil microbiome interactions that I looked at some of these products with some suspicion. But growers were reporting they had seen some positive impacts. So I agreed to lead a project looking at evaluating some of these. So after digging into the academic literature, we settled on a series of these products that contain the genus Glomus, which is a fungi which helps form these arbuscular mycorrhizae. So these fungi are obligate biotrophs, and they form an association with the root for nutrient exchange. And so what happens is that then these fungi have hyphae, these little filaments that grow out from the fungi. They can access pools of nutrients that vine roots aren't currently accessing, and they can help stabilize the soil as well. So to give you a little bit more perspective on this, I want to contrast it with a previous project that I had led, which was, to be honest, somewhat of a spectacular failure in terms of farmer adoption. So in grape growing regions around the world, growers will use remote, either proximal or remote sense data to sequence the harvesting of portions of their vineyard blocks. So they'll see that there's a low area, an area of low vigor versus an area of high vigor, and they'll sequence those differently within a block. And so I thought this was a great idea, widely accepted around the world. Went out, found a team of growers to work with me on this. Farm Viability, thankfully, funded the project. Everyone had agreed what we were going to do. We got the drone, we had a long list of growers. We couldn't get to everyone who wanted us to image their vineyards, because those are pretty cool images, right? And you get to see that there's a lot more variability than you can really pick up necessarily with the naked eye. But when it came to acting on those images, growers weren't really doing that. And when I look back at why not, it's because I hadn't really worked with them as a team, right? I said, here's my idea. Will you do it? And they said, sure, we'll do it. We have a good relationship. They tend to want to be helpful when it comes to my program. But then at the time, I hadn't really convinced them of what were the economic benefits to doing this, right? As if there was a winery involved, there was a slight economic benefit there, but just to grape growers, I hadn't really convinced them. And then looking back, I think the problem is I was 100% in the driver's seat, and I had the idea, and I recruited the team, and I developed the objectives. If I compare that to my current project, which has been much more successful in terms of farmer adoption, that was a grower idea. As they came to me as a small team, then recruited a bigger team of people who could actually get involved in this. It was after some back and forth, it was really the growers that developed a lot of those objectives about what they wanted to do. Their questions were, which of these products should we actually be using? And so we had a replicated trial, and then we had a series of, I think there were 8 growers who trialed at least one product on their farms, and then we collected data from there too. So their idea, they organized the team, they developed the objectives, and that has now led to them being very interested in further pursuing this. And after some back and forth, they've developed some objectives for what they'd like to see in the next proposal as well. I think in terms of other growers adopting this, so right now I've got this group of people who I'd consider to be sort of early adopters of some of the newer research ideas. To go from there, I think I need a really strong economic justification. Because if we calculate out the prices for what these products actually cost on a per acre basis to put out in the vineyard, then we're looking at usually anywhere from about $250, I think, up to about $475 per acre with what we've been working on. Now, the economic justification will hopefully come with the ability of these hyphae that come from the fungi to access water and nutrients. So even at $500 an acre, if we are able to increase our yield by 1/4 ton of fruit per acre, that covers the cost. But while there's been a lot of grower interest in adopting these, there's the major group of growers is saying, we're going to wait until you show us the numbers and show us what difference these products are really going to make for us.
Great, thank you. Do a quick time check here, and we are just so on time. This is the most amazing panel I have ever been involved with. Can you talk, Justine, just a little bit about maybe some other ways that might engage grape growers in focusing on soil health? Frequently, and you know, Aaron and Corinne both talk about soil health in terms of row crops and regular tillage and that sort of thing. In vineyards and orchards, not quite the same situation. So how do you gain, or how do you start down that soil health road with those farmers?
Yeah, that's right. So when it comes to vineyards and orchards, people don't tend to think about soil health as much because we have what we call resident vegetation that grows between rows, right? It's been about 30 years since people usually cultivated between the rows. So now we have vegetation between the rows, and then either herbicide cultivation or an undervine cover crop that is actually underneath the rows. So growers are thinking about soil health, but it's actually an interesting situation because there's a little bit of back and forth where we don't, for wine grapes, want these grapevine canopies to grow too big. And so, you know, I've heard this hesitation, well, if my soil's really healthy, is my canopy going to be too big and cost me more to manage? But the flip side of that is that growers are right next to the lakes here. The public knows that they're right next to the lakes, and they really want to limit off-site impacts. And so that's driving a lot of their interest in soil health. So one of the other projects I'm involved in, which is led by Erasmus Aware, who's a geologist at the University of Buffalo, at SUNY Buffalo, is on an easy model to map cation exchange capacity in a soil. So cation exchange capacity is basically an indicator of binding sites, the availability of binding sites in a soil. The process for measuring it is reasonably arduous, it's expensive, and it produces hazardous waste. So it's an important number that we want, particularly in vineyards, because in vineyards, we use a fair amount of potassium. Well, grapes are a big user of potassium, and we have to worry about that magnesium-potassium ratio. And so this is affected by cation exchange capacity. So with Erasmus Aware, we're working to develop a model for predicting cation exchange capacity at a high spatial resolution based on apparent soil electroconductivity and then soil chargeability as well. And one of the reasons we're doing this is so that we can try to reduce leaching of nutrients that's coming from the soil, because if we don't have binding sites to tie up these nutrients that we're putting on, then they are just going to leach out with some of our excessive rains. And again, you know, this is a project which I'm so glad to be involved in, and it's a great idea. It's a great idea that came from the industry. This came from Dave Wyman at Sheldrake Point, who said, hey, you guys should develop an easy model for this. And we thought, wow, what a great idea. And so the growers have been keen on getting their soils mapped and then discussing sort of management plans around those, around fertilization or placement of tile drainage to move water around and that sort of thing. So I think there is a big interest with the growers in soil health, and my most successful projects relating to this have really been grower ideas that I've been able to work with and come up with some projects that I'm hoping will be really beneficial to the entire industry.
Great, thank you. So I want to come back to Corinne real quick. And so you've been working hard on trying to sort of crack the nitrogen use code, so to speak. Can you share your perspectives about the ideas that have resonated with the agricultural community and what you think is needed next?
All right, sure. So nitrogen, for those of you that have tried to manage it, you will know that it's a very difficult nutrient to manage. It's very mobile. It can change forms fairly rapidly from one to another. So it is a difficult nutrient to manage. Since it is connected to both the ability of the crops to grow properly, so it's an essential nutrient, and the impact that agriculture could have on the environment, it is really important for us to learn more about it and to find out how to manage it better. So in our program, we work with various nutrients, but nitrogen is an important one for us. What we basically want to do is give farmers tools that they can use to make decisions about will it benefit the crop? Will it result in a crop response? Where can I hold off? How do I manage manure so that I can capture that nitrogen? Questions like that. Now, for anything you want to evaluate, Emma mentioned the 4 R's, the right rate, the right source, the timing and method. That 4 R's is, as I mentioned, difficult to do. But if you want to know if a change was an improvement on crop production, one of the most essential things for us to work on is to measure yield, to measure what is important to the farm, crop production, yields. We want to know if a management change is an improvement, results in an improvement for yield. It is also important to figure out if you can match the nitrogen better to that yield. But my view, looking into the future, the projects that we are focusing on are all somewhere related to our ability to measure yields on the farm. Now, I went back starting 20 years ago with the Phosphorus project that I mentioned. In that project, when we did that, there were no yield monitors. All the yields that we collected were measured either in the field with truck scales or at the farm level with farm scales or by hand. Very intensive approach. Not everybody can do that. So what I see moving forward is if we get a better handle on what yields are, we can do a lot of evaluations that help us make better decisions. With the yield monitors, we focus a lot on that in our program right now because it gives us the opportunity to measure yield, not just at the field level, but also at the within field level. And the reason why we do that is because we have variability in our fields. And anytime you measure or manage for the average, there will be the risk of over applying in certain parts and under applying in other parts. And neither of those two is good. So if we can better match the nutrient needs to what the nutrient application to what the crop needs, we have a better chance of improving the bottom line of the farmer and protecting the environment against the loss of nutrients. So part of what I see we need to move forward in is make it easier to measure yield. Find tools that allow us to do that. We started out with crop sensors on farm equipment. Yield monitors is what we're looking at. But I would love to see every farm in the state of New York being able to tap into yield data. So what we're doing right now is looking at drone and satellite imagery. And the picture on the right of the screen here is our first results, fresh off the press from last week, where we are trying to predict yield based on satellite imagery. Now, in terms of other tools, it's not just knowing yield. Yield is a tool by itself. Like if we know the yield, we can evaluate if it was different from another treatment. But to also invest time on finding ways to better hold on to the nutrients that we are applying. So technologies that include manure incorporation, manure injection, manure treatment to reduce volatilization of nitrogen from manure. Things like enhanced efficiency fertilizers that could help us increase the efficiency of that fertilizer, therefore potentially lowering the rate or increasing crop yield. Other tools that we're looking at, there's soil testing tools that can help us in terms of soil health, in terms of soil nitrogen supply potential. We've looked at plant samples that plant analysis that can help us make decisions such as the cornstalk nitrate test. The most exciting ones we're working on right now are whole farm evaluations with nutrient mass balances, where a farm can evaluate at the whole farm level how efficient nitrogen is being used, and nitrogen and phosphorus balances at the field level. So we have an at the end of the season evaluation tool that allows farmers to rank their fields from low efficiency to very high efficiency. And then we can look at why is the efficiency so low on some areas? What's the barrier there? And how can we make those changes? All of these tools are currently being evaluated or already have been put in place with the farmers, with the consultants involved, so that we put in place practical solutions with the goal of better decisions in terms of the 4 R's.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to come back to all 3 of you and so pose the question here. What do you see as the biggest challenge to doing this work and developing these projects that really develop win-win solutions for farmers and for the environment? What do you see as the biggest challenges?
So I can jump in, Dave, and express my opinion on this. I think one of the challenges for these win-win situations is that we need to make some of these changes more affordable. So, for example, I think both remotely sensed data and proximally sensed data are going to be key for improving efficiency in vineyards. One project I'm involved in which is led by Marcus Keller at Washington State, and Terry Bates at Cornell, and Jan Van Aert at RIT are involved, is how do we make nutrient sampling better in the field? So for each vineyard block that a grower has, and they have many, many blocks, we expect them to go out and do a large random sample to collect either petioles or leaf blades, and then dry those for 24 hours and then put them in a package and then send them off to a lab for analysis. From an environmental perspective, for what we're putting on for fertilizers and for yield and then fruit quality, this is a really important question, but that's a really arduous task to do that. So one of the things we're looking at is, can we use hyperspectral sensing to identify these nutrient deficiencies so that we can use a source of information that doesn't involve the growers actually having to go out into the field and put their time and effort into this. So as we were putting together this project with Washington State I was telling you about, we have a large grower advisory panel, and one of the growers said, well, I see two problems here. One is that hyperspectral data is going to be expensive for a while, at least until the price comes down. And two is, what if it doesn't work? What are you going to do? So one of the things I work on for that is sort of an intermediate plan that doesn't rely on really expensive data. So it's, how can we use data we already have to better guide our sampling to make it more efficient? But I think there's all these great ideas for how do we improve economic sustainability? How do we improve environmental sustainability? And a lot of these are coming from the growers, but right now the cost of getting some of this information is still on the high side. Hopefully will come down in the next few years.
Thank you. Erin or Corinne?
I can maybe add to that a little bit. For us on field crops, we can learn a lot when we can experiment on our own property. And there is a decent number of farmers that buy into that and want to do the extra work involved in putting these trials out to get answers. But having to put an on-farm trial out is a barrier by itself for many farmers. They have no time or not the right equipment to do it. So what I'm really excited about for our program here with field crops is that the potential to make on-farm research easier to do, to change the way we implement and analyze our trials, with replacing what we normally do with multiple strips replicated across a field, and change that into an approach that just requires one single strip of a treatment through a field. But in a field where we know the history, where we have past yield data, we have zones, management zones developed, and we can use the spatial information that comes from the yield monitor data. If we can do this, then the hurdle, the barrier to putting on-farm research out will be so much lower than it is currently. And that, in my view, is going to help us parallel this, or move this forward much quicker than we've ever been able to do.
Thank you. Erin?
Yeah, so I agree with both of what has been said. So maybe just a different perspective for me would be to add is I think that coming from trying to get these practices on the ground that we are working with when talking about cover crops or no-till, like a lot of times it is relied on state programs or federal programs, and the scale that we need to get the acreage covered, and with the variety of farm types and everything out there, you know, we're not going to be able to cost share our way to the environmental piece. And so I think that, you know, moving forward, it's going to be very important to get this information that has been discussed, and so that farmers can minimize their risk and lower all these barriers, so that they can learn how to best do these things on their own without the help of the government, because, you know, again, the government funding and has its place, but it's just not enough in order to cover what we needed to do to really have that large impact on everything, on helping the farm be viable, farms, more types of farms to be viable, and then also across the landscape and getting those practices. So having information is critical, and there's lots of different ways to do it. And what was mentioned previously here are great ideas. So
great, thank you. So we did have. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was going to ask if I could add to Corinne's point. I'll be brief about the need for on-farm research. In this project I'm doing with the soil biostimulants, they've worked out so well at our replicated sites, almost too well, and I never would have believed the data had I not had 8 other growers experimenting with this to back it up. I would have said it's just this site, or it's just these vines, or something like that. So I used to think of it as we got data from research, and then there were these grower trials, and I don't think I saw as close a connection. Whereas now I think it's so necessary to really make sure that we're fully understanding what our research results are and can share those easily with industry.
Great, thank you.
Maybe I can add a little bit more, Dave. Sorry, we're not letting you go on.
Well, there are questions coming in, so go ahead.
Yeah. Just to add on to all of that, this on-farm, this network type approach to the boots on the ground, that is not a cheap process, right? So a huge component of moving forward is having access to being able to tap into funding sources that support outcome-based research. And that's why farm viability has been a tremendous resource for us over the last, many years since I started, actually.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. On-farm research is difficult and prone to loss of samples and plots, shall we say. And I certainly have that experience in my background, but that's important to farm viability, certainly.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in, and because Quirine, I was going to say the same things. Funding that comes from farm viability is very critical in being able to do this work. So thank you.
Thank you. Without you doing the work, we wouldn't be very far. So I did get a question came in from someone in the audience here. Says we need to make technologies more available. I 100% agree, but I'm wondering, how do we do that as data continues to get more proprietary and segmented, and how do we educate growers on how to use the data appropriately?
So I can jump in here and give some examples from grapes. So yes, a lot of data is proprietary, but it tends to be, in my opinion, newer data. So for example, there's the Sentinel-2 satellite by the European Space Agency. That data is free, and if you know GIS, reasonably easy to get. So I feel like there's sort of this empty box that we need to be addressing, which is just, how do we get this free data into the hands of the industry, and how do we work with them on action plans based on that data? So Katie Gold, who's our new plant pathologist for grapes at Cornell Agritech, she has a project funded by the Cornell Institute of Digital Agriculture on how do we use some of these free streams of remote sensing, get them to growers, because we do have an extension specialist, Jim Myers, who's starting to aggregate data sources and pass them on. And then how do we develop action plans? But I agree, there are some expensive proprietary sources that are difficult to access. But I feel like that's always the newer information, whereas the older technologies can still be really useful.
Karina, anything to add?
So on my experience, there is protected information that we can't easily get access to, that is sometimes standing in the way of making progress. But I tend to turn that around and say, okay, what information does the farm have? Because the first thing I need to do is give back value to that farm. I don't want to even ask them to share information if I can't return anything to them. So we try to formulate up front what the value for the farm could be if particular information is being shared. And the farm does have control over some of that information. It's not all disappearing in the cloud. So we have currently about 200,000 acres of corn silage and corn grain yield data submitted by farmers. That's in our database. We try to give value back to the individual farms with individual farm reports, but at the same time, they contribute to a much larger scale project to update databases and develop zone-based management. It seems to work so far.
Thanks. So we're just right on the cusp of running out of time here, unfortunately, and I think we could go on for quite a long time. Questions are coming in, and of course I have questions that I didn't ask at all. But some of the things that I heard that I'd like to just summarize here, and then we'll give you the opportunity to have one last comment if you would like. So one of the important features that I have heard is you know, the farmers and consultants coming to you with questions and problems. So projects, and that seems to be more in terms of farm viability, projects that come to us that are, you know, they found a problem and the project is looking to solve it, versus here's a project I want to do, and then I'll go out and see if there's a problem that it will solve. And you know, so and a really important distinction, and we see them both in our proposals. But that seems like a real key across the three of you is farmers saying, we need this. The visibility of the project, and you know, farmers being able to see it. I know Aaron has roadside signs that call attention to the fields, that this field is part of the project. And Corinne, you mentioned consultants doing field days on, and consultants bringing the customers by the plots and things like that. All really important in terms of just getting the buzz out there about the project. The other thing I heard was the concerns about the upfront costs exceeding the benefits, and you know, the economics. And one of the things that I really thought it was interesting that Aaron mentioned was you know, the economics on one side of the handout, but the story on the other. The story of the farm and why the farmer wants to do that, or why the farmer thinks that's important. Because sometimes we get so locked up in the data that we forget that all these farms and all these farmers have human sides as well. And then the whole idea, in fact, there was a question that came in about this, the whole idea of farmer networking and peer-to-peer learning, and how do you set up those kinds of communities, and increasing farmer participation in the projects. So those are some of the themes that I heard running through this that I think are important takeaways. And I'd like to give each of you a quick minute if you would like for a final comment, and then we'll call it a day. Who would like to go first?
Maybe I can. For me as a faculty member at Cornell, it's a tremendous joy to be able to work with the farmers, with the farmer advisors, to build these networks, to identify where the problems are and try to move forward, come up with practical solutions. And as I mentioned before, it absolutely is essential to have sustained funding to do so that we don't turn over our staff every year. But are capable of being efficient with our time and our projects. It's a lot of fun to do these projects. Like Aaron mentioned, I hope soon we can be back in the fields at the frequency that we used to be, and pick this up again. In the meantime, just thanks for the support.
Yeah, I can go next. So yeah, again, I second what Corinne says. It is very, I really am appreciative of the farmers and stepping up, and we do actually hope to expand our network either within the watershed to different farm types or to other parts of the state. But you know, without the farmers, this wouldn't happen, and without the funding from folks like the Farm Viability Institute, we wouldn't be able to support the farmers in this way. So it really is critical for, it's a team effort, and it is exciting to work with these farms. So grateful for that, and grateful for farm viability. Thank you.
Justine?
So very briefly, I work with a fantastic industry, and they're so keen, and that makes it wonderful. The question about, building some of these networks, one thing I want to point out is I am so thankful for my colleagues at Cornell Cooperative Extension and within Cornell who cultivate these relationships and have helped these groups of growers develop networks over years, right? And I think researchers sometimes forget to take advantage of some of our colleagues in Extension who are much more trained in doing this sort of thing. So I wanted to mention that, and just say that I think the outcome-based funding that New York Farm Viability Institute provides is a fantastic way of making sure that the growers are getting what they need from these types of projects.
Great. Thank you. Well, my watch shows that we are right on time, out of time. And so I want to thank the panel. Great panel. I really enjoyed it. And the hour just flew by, for me anyway. Also want to thank Farm Credit for helping us sponsor this, and for the educational platform that they're providing here. Thanks to Emma for her introductory comments, and a special thanks to Eileen Randolph, who is here in the office working on keeping things flowing and setting up all these webinars. And she's done a tremendous job and put a lot of effort into that. And I think that all is really paying off. So appreciate her efforts in that regard as well. And I, for one, am really looking forward to getting back to some field days and some in-person meetings and the interpersonal interaction again with researchers, educators, and farmers. So thank you very much for your participation on the panel today. Thanks for the participants for being here, and hopefully you found this valuable, and you will join us on March 5th for the last of our series, where we'll be focusing on some technology adoption in the dairy industry. So thank you very much, and everyone have a great